I was in public ministry for several years in California. I pastored a small church that I started called Homeward Bound. And for reasons that I'm probably not going to say just at this moment, that ministry needed to come to a close, and I needed to concentrate on my family. During that period of time, God moved me to what I would call a remote part of the world, because anything out of Hollywood would be remote, and said, this would be a good time for you to concentrate on creating music. And he knew that I worked specifically in concepts. So if I wrote one country song, I was a country artist, and I was going to do 30 country songs. And then they'd have a thread through them, a theme. And I would go on to the next thing, and I'd be like, well, now I do blues, so now I'm going to write 30 blues songs. And then I was, techno, and then I was goth and punk and glam, and I went through these things, and I prayed through the whole process, because it was years of writing stuff, and I prayed through the whole process, and I was like, well, what am I going to be when I grow up? And God said, well, you're going to do what's in your heart, and whatever's in your heart, that's what you do. You make sure you do what's in your heart. So whatever it is you want to do, you do it. Now, those are the rules. Do exactly what you want to do. So if you ever want to go through my piles of papers, I did a lot of things that I wanted to do during that period of time. There were two periods of creativity that were profound during this process. There was the Las Vegas Review period, which actually was the very last period before I began working on my first record. That was when I wrote the late night R-rated show to do in Las Vegas. That was a comedy rock opera review thing where I could pretty much write songs about anything as long as I could figure out a way to tie them into some kind of skit for a one-man performer. And I wrote 1 billion songs for this. I also wrote 1 billion jokes for this that I use in my shows all the time now. My favorite joke that I wrote for it was when I was talking about my musical theater history and all the crappy shows I got, I would say, yes, there were to be no Annies on my horizon, but I was going to do a lot of Daddy Warbucks along the way. I made that up. That was mine. That was one of the cleaner jokes. It was pretty funny stuff. I have a stack of jokes. I just went through a period where now I'm a comedy writer. That's still my favorite. That was mine, and that's still my favorite. The other period that was so profound to me was the Day of the Dead period. The Day of the Dead being the day after Halloween, where the people of the Mexican culture celebrate their loved ones who have passed by really doing a lot of creepy looking things. The artwork's amazing, the music's amazing. Did I mention the artwork's really amazing? And I wrote a series of Day of the Dead performances. I think I got up to Day of the Dead Part 7. And each one had about 20 songs attached to it. And what was interesting about Day of the Dead Part 1 through 7 was that 99% of what I do now was birthed during that process, but especially during Part 1. Because let's be fair, we put our favorite songs in the first group. Carole King did that with Tapestry. and shot herself in the foot. And so the first group had, well, I don't know. I'm trying to remember what songs were in it. Well, it had Sad Christmas. Sad Christmas was actually not the opening song, it was the second song. The song I did Tonight Some Other Time was the opening song. Maybe it was the other way around. But they were both in it. And several songs that I went on to record or rewrite for subsequent records were in that first group. But recently I got my hands on all these papers and I went through them and noticed how many songs were birthed during this period of time. And as well as my Vegas review, Secrets came out of that. It was a completely different song, but it came out of that period. And on each record, when I've been like, now I just need a song that doesn't sound like the other songs. Oh yeah, I wrote that one once, and they seem to keep coming from the same source. And what I loved about the concept of Days of the Dead was that, well, I wrote a week's worth. And each day concentrated on a different issue. And I swore this was what I was going to do, and of course, I never did it. I did what birthed out of it, that's for sure. But I never went back and did the the Days of the Dead series. And recently, I have been feeling this stirring from God about my work, my ministry, my music, my art, and I just finished a record, and I'm very happy with it. I'm extremely happy with it, and yet it feels 8 billion years away all of a sudden. And I'm already working on a new record, and I've written all the songs, which means I've written some new songs, and I've yanked some songs out of the Days of the Dead series, and I'm getting ready to record this record, and I've worked incredibly hard on it. Incredibly hard. Harder than I've worked on the last 3 records combined. Because I swore eventually I would get to a record again where I sat down with a guitar or a piano and wrote the dang thing. I just sat down and wrote it from beginning to end, and didn't go into the studio and just let the tracks roll and just kind of write it on the spot or create on the spot or create effects on the spot. There would be no effects. It would just be really strong songs. And I worked really hard on it. And recently, I've had this stirring where God started talking to me saying, do you remember what it was like to leap from genre to genre? Do you remember what it was like to say, it's irrelevant what I did before because this is what I feel like doing now and I'm going to dive into it wholeheartedly? Do you remember what that was like? Didn't you apply that to all your records? Didn't you say, I'm going to be true to this record even if it doesn't work well with the last record? Of course I did. I've abandoned songs that were really strong because they're so different than what I do now, because I'm totally committed to what I do now. And I felt this stirring, and I realized that stirring is like the most exciting feeling in the world to me, because that means I'm still alive. Meaning, my work in God, for the world, is still alive. And that's a really good feeling. It's a really good feeling, trust me. And I was really excited about the next record, I really was. But once upon a time, I was going to record a record that was originally called Desire Unplugged. And it was going to be an acoustic record of all my best songs. And I was totally ready to do it. I had booked studio time to do it. And the day I went to go record it, I was practicing Jesus Eyes on the guitar.